make it in the morning. I'm sure a lot of us were partying last night, huh? I am the president for MAC India, which is the multidisciplinary alliance for cannabis and hemp, as well as I'm the co-founder for Hemp Horizons, which is a manufacturing company in India for the seed nutrition products, as well as for the medicinal cannabis extracts. So what I'm going to be talking about is, how India can be developed into one of the largest cannabis and hemp markets in the country. Just a little bit about our association, Alliance. So, we are obviously working to increase the full potential of hemp and cannabis and recognized in the industrial, medicinal, as well as the environmental benefits. We are working towards raising awareness. We are working towards, conducting research and promoting product innovations around industrial, medicinal, as well as environmental impacts, and advocacy towards the policy changes. So, India has had policies around cannabis for the longest time ever, right? And since the 1985, we had this NDPS Narcotics Act. And even in there, I'll go over that more in my presentation, but cannabis or medicines made out of cannabis are federally legal in the country and can be dispensed as a prescription medicine. We collaborate with a lot of government bodies for research, for product innovation, as well as private stakeholders, as well as foster investments for the stakeholders in and outside of India. So we'll just go over the history and the use of cannabis in India a little bit, and then I'll take you through the different land races and genetics that are available in the country. So this is interesting. One of the most oldest scriptures in India, 6,000 years old, Atharva Veda, mentions about cannabis, bhang, as we call it in Hindi. And it says it is one of the 5 sacred plants in the country for its medicinal and therapeutic purposes. So imagine 6,000 years ago, we were already talking about hemp or cannabis, and we were using it for different purposes, whether medicinal, therapeutic, etc. Just a little history. I'm sure most of us know about this, so I'll go over this really, really quickly. 6,000 years ago, the Vedas, the Hindu text, have been talking about hemp and cannabis as one of the sacred plants. Around 1000 to 1700 CE, India saw hemp being used in saris, in textiles, in rugs, in dhotis. You might have seen those white garbs that the men wear. So all those things, had started being using in India by that time. The 1500s, the Mughal Emperor Akbar, who was also responsible for, spreading Buddhism in India and other countries, also encouraged the cultivation of hemp for fiber and seeds. 1793 was when the British East India Company established a hemp farm in Bengal to supply raw materials to the British textile industry. And this was not just for clothing, but this was also for the ships that they were using to come to India and use them as sails. 1896 was the time when the Indian Hemp Drugs Commission was established, and the British government at the time, when ruling India, started studying about the effects of cannabis on the Indian society, because India was already using everything that you can imagine, right? India was using cannabis for medicines, it was using hemp for clothing, it was using it for nutrition, and back in 1896, the British government wanted to understand what's happening. Why is there already an ecosystem established in the country? The 1940s and 60s, obviously, because of the synthetic fibers coming in, the pharma coming in, there was a decline in the cultivation, and at the same time, criminalization was on its peak during that time. And finally, in 1985, the NDPS, Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act, criminalized or restricted the production, sale, and consumption of cannabis in India. So in synopsis, India has been using cannabis for 1,000 years, over thousands of years, for medicinal, spiritual, recreational purposes, mentioned in one of the oldest texts in the country. And, this is pretty interesting if you see here, Ayurveda, the traditional form of medicine in India, already has over 200 classical formulations where cannabis is one of the key ingredients. And these formulations you will find are for hypertension, for anti-inflammatory, for epilepsy, and other diseases. A little bit about the Indian land races and genetics. So, India is a rich country when it comes to the land races and indigenous cannabis crops. Right? We have over 1,500 varieties all throughout the country. And all of them currently are growing in their natural state in the wild. I'll talk about certain strains that we have, looked upon and studied upon. So, and the interesting part here, you will find, let me just go back, sorry. So what you'll find is, certain states, so like the first one, the second one, both of them come from the same state, but the first one, like the Kumao Himalayan hemp, is rich in fiber, and according to the Journal of Natural Fibers, is very good for producing the industrial fiber and textiles out of it. Similarly, the same state has another indigenous variety, which is more on the medicinal and aromatic side. So it is high in cannabinoids and THC. So imagine, these strains, if we were able to take advantage of these strains and develop them, the kind of cannabinoids or the kind of, fibers that we'll get out of these strains. And these have been growing by itself for thousands of years. No intervention, no human intervention. The third strain, Bombay Kush. Bombay, I'm sure a lot of people know that name. It's a city, and this is one of the land races from that city, from that state, which is known to be a cannabinoid-rich plant. The other three, so again, you'll see Uttar Pradesh hemp, one of the varieties, according to the Journal of Industrial Hemp, was found to be a high fiber yield crop. Again, grown in the wild, no human intervention. Similarly, Prakash is another fiber yielding variety. So if you look at, we went to the back, we had this from the Uttarakhand area. This is a state, which was a fiber rich variety. This is again from the same state, which is a cannabinoid rich variety. And if we go to this one, again, we have a landrace, which is a fiber rich variety. So, all these plants, all these land races are sort of growing in an ecosystem and not disturbing each other on the pollination or any of those things. Similarly, the last one is from Maharashtra, and this is a fiber-rich variety as well. These two are the oil seed-rich varieties, and again, this one comes from the same state, Uttarakhand. This one comes from Rajasthan, and all of these, the strains that I'm talking to you about are the ones that have been studied in India, right, by various journals, whether that is a Natural Fiber Journal or whether that is a oilseed journal or a cannabinoid research journal. A little bit about the studies. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just talk about, the studies that have been done in India for various purposes. So for example, Dr. Ravi, he highlighted the traditional uses of Indian cannabis on the medical conditions such as pain, inflammation, neurological disorders, etc. And this was possible only because of those 200, 250 formulations that are present as a traditional medicine in India, and that can be dispensed around the country legally as a prescription medicine. Another study by Dr. Chandra was on the Indian land races, and he identified, the high degree of genetic diversity, right? And as we saw earlier on the Indian land races and genetics, how the same state can have, 4 or 5 different varieties of cannabis land races, whether that's fiber-rich, oilseed-rich, or even the cannabinoid-rich plants. Another study by Dr. Sharma was done on the high levels of essential fatty acids, right? So people have been, looking at these plants in different ways in India already. They have been studying and looking at, not just the THC or the cannabinoid side, but also the nutrition and the fiber side. And similarly, Dr. Singh in 2018, he found varieties of the cannabis plant naturally grown, which had THC of as high as 20% in the wild without any human intervention. Another study by Dr. Bera, found out that Indian hemp has good fiber for the purposes of industrial purposes, whether that's textiles, composites, etc. and Dr. El Choli in 2016 also studied the CBD levels, the chemical profiles, and the THC levels in the Indian strains. So these are some of the studies that, if you look into it, if you Google it, you will find a lot of data. So I wanted to present this so that, you guys can really go back, understand the kind of genetics, the kind of, research that has been going on in India so far. A little bit about the market. I'm sure, everybody knows these numbers. But if you look at, India is this in black. And India is super small when it comes to the numbers, right? Especially when it comes to the hemp industry, which is the nutrition, grain, herd, and the fiber. These are some of the lowest, industries in India right now. And obviously, medicinal is something that we have federally legal. So people are going after these prescription-based traditional medicines or proprietary-based extracts and then dispensing around the country. So that becomes the major revenue generator currently, at least for the Indian companies. The economic potential, right? Now, these are numbers that I've taken from different studies. These are not the numbers that I have prepared. But, if the global cannabis market is around $100 billion by 2026, we anticipate at least 10 to 15% of that will be catered by India, right? And it's just because of the sheer volume that we have, the sheer industries that we have, not just on the medicine side of pharmaceutical rich industry, the fiber industry with, cotton and polyester being made, spun, fabrics being made in India, and so on and so forth, right? And prohibition partners, estimated the Indian legal cannabis market to be over 5.8 billion, out of which 1.5 seems to be from the medicinal cannabis market. And finally, the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce, FICCI, they did an estimation that, the day Indian government fully legalizes cannabis in India, the first year alone, we're going to obviously have over 18,000, 20,000 jobs in the country for various different categories. In conclusion, the cannabis has been a long-standing land race in India. If you visited India, if you've noticed, some of the states when you drive down, you'll find the cannabis plants growing on either side of the road, right? There is already an ecosystem where the government has authorized cannabis shops in the country to dispense certain cannabis balls made out of the leaf, right? So as a country, what we can use the leaves of the plant to make these medicines, but we're not allowed to use the flower. And similarly, we are able to use the seed fit for human consumption for all the nutritional aspects and the fiber for textiles. Finally, why would India hold a key position in the world? One of the biggest is the land races that we have, right? And these are the land races that are not studied as much. So, a few slides earlier, I showed about 9 or 10 strains, land races that people have studied, but there are over 1,000 strains that needed studying and taken up, in terms of what they can offer. And, where the Western market is going with the customized grows for different ailments is something that we can find in India as well, with the traditional medicines or with the land races that we have. A pre-established framework that already exists in the country, and this is obviously with the public and private partnerships on the R&D opportunities that are available. The government is ready to work on R&D with the private companies to establish research, innovation, etc. We are able to dispense full spectrum medicines around the country, so we don't have a law around isolating the compounds within, right? So we can extract from the leaf and then sell that extract as is, right? As a 100% potent extract, or we can make other, tinctures out of it. Hemp seed has been deemed fit for human consumption in India, and we have a great ecosystem, and the industry is growing many folds because now the pet industry, the fooding industry, the horeca industry have started looking at hemp as one of the food sources in the country. And finally, fiber. So Fiber India has, huge textile industries, a huge textile export. And, a lot of big fiber conglomerates have started working on the hemp fiber and doing research in terms of the textiles, bed sheets, curtains, drapes, etc. The favorable economics, well, we are a tropical climate, so we do have, good geoclimatic conditions for large scale grow operations, whether indoors or outdoors. Existing infrastructure in machine manufacturing, right? Being a big country, whether you talk about extraction systems, a CO2 extractor or a cryoethanol, or you talk about cottonization of hemp or water retting or anything to do with the seed hulling or cold press or whatever, right? India manufactures those machines, right? It has always been manufacturing those machines. And if you look at the cost compared to any other country around the world, India is pretty cheap. We have inexpensive agriculture and operational staff, so that makes it more viable because the cost of the product, the cost of exports, the cost of packaging, the cost of machinery, everything goes down because of the current agriculture and operational staff and the kind of salaries are given to the staff, the minimum wage that is in the country. The current government, you might have heard, Modi is our PM, and he's been, going out everywhere and, strengthening ties of India with other countries. And, we have a lot of free trade agreements, especially the recent one being with Australia. And we are able to, import and export hemp and cannabis products. And finally, the market side does it all. 1.4 billion people. So imagine the kind of market we have to generate the kind of revenues. And thank you. I invite you all to ask any questions if you have.